Hi, everybody. My name is Curtis Mitch, and I'm with the St. Paul Center for Biblical Theology, and welcome back to another segment of our Quarantined Catholic Hub. Today, we'll be looking at the Mass readings for Monday, May 25th. And the Gospel reading for today is taken from the Gospel of John, chapter 16, verses 29 to 33. Now, in today's Gospel, Jesus is speaking about his hour. Right? And this has been a theme in the Gospel of John since the very beginning, since the wedding of Cana, when Jesus said that his hour had not yet come. Well, now Jesus is preparing his disciples for the imminent arrival of this hour. All right? And he's been using cryptic language. He's been speaking in figures. He's saying things like, in a little while I'll be gone, and then in a little while you will see me again. And the disciples are very perplexed by this. And Jesus actually compares this coming hour to childbirth and to the painful experience, the difficulty of bringing new life into the world. But of course, in comparing his hour to childbirth, he's saying that the end of the story brings joy and new life. And he's saying to the disciples that his passion is coming, but his passion will be followed by a resurrection. And his resurrection will be followed by an ascension when Jesus returns to the Father. So it's not a story that ends with death. It's not even a story that ends with resurrection. It's a story that ends with enthronement, with Jesus coming back to the Father who sent him on this mission among us. Now, for the disciples, this represents sort of like an aha moment, a moment of new discovery or deeper discovery. And what do they discover about Jesus? They're discovering something new about the divinity of the Son of God. All right? And so it's been a process, if you think about it. Jesus didn't just kind of walk up to the disciples, ask them to follow him and say, hey, by the way, I am God. Jesus didn't take that approach. On the contrary, he was revealing his mystery slowly through miracles, through signs, through expressions of love. But this is a new moment in this long process of divine revelation, where Jesus reveals something new about himself. And his disciples, it finally clicks. The pieces snap together and they understand. So in the Gospel of John chapter 16, we start out with his disciples said, now we know that you are speaking plainly, not in any figure. Now we know that you know all things and need none to question you. By this we believe that you have come from God. So what are the disciples actually saying here? The disciples have just discovered and are confessing their faith in this man Jesus and saying he's omniscient. He knows all things. All right? This is something that's been steadily, slowly revealed over the course of Jesus' life. I think back to the story of the Samaritan woman, all right, where Jesus told her about her past, about the relationships that she has had and the struggles that she has had along the way. And she marveled, thinking he's at the very least, sir, you must be a prophet. But Jesus is more than that. Jesus knows all things. He shares in the omniscience of God. All right, so that's the first thing. The second thing is Jesus says something about his origin, or at least his disciples come to discover that in a new way. We have come to believe that you have come from God. All right? Now, readers of the Gospel of John already know this, because the very first line of the gospel says that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But that's something that the reader knows. It's something that the disciples in the midst of the story are slowly discovering. And here they finally arrive at that moment of more mature faith. Jesus is the Son sent from the Father. He is God from God, true light from true light. All right. Now, why does Jesus bring the disciples to this point, this moment of discovery, this opportunity for a new faith, for a deepened faith? Well, because he says there's going to be a time of testing ahead. And so we read in verse 31, Jesus answered the disciples, "Do you now believe? The hour is coming, indeed it has come, when you will be scattered, every man to his home, and you will leave me alone. Yet I am not alone, for the Father is with me." So what is Jesus saying? Jesus is saying, you all will actually abandon me. I'm trying to strengthen your faith now because that faith is about to be tested. Tribulation is coming. You will abandon me. You will scatter like sheep when the shepherd is struck. But understand that I'm not alone because the Father is always with me. The Father, the Son, and the Spirit live in an eternal communion. They're never isolated from one another. Jesus comes to us to reveal that God is a family. So the Father is with me. Now, why would he say that? How does that apply to this tribulation that is coming? Well, I think Jesus wants to tell his disciples that it's going to be difficult in the days ahead. It's going to be difficult to see past the evil that rages around Jesus in the midst of his passion. The condemnation, the false accusations, the physical brutality, and finally the execution by crucifixion on the cross. It will be difficult for you and your faith to see past that evil, to see that something good is being done here. But Jesus wants to remind them that this is part of the plan. This is how that evil is overcome. This is how I will win back sinners from the hand of Satan. This is how I will gather back the children of God and reconcile them with the Father once and for all. And so Jesus ends, it never ends with the tribulation, the trouble, the difficulty, the pain, and the passion. He always ends with the victory. And so he says, it's the last verse of today's reading, in verse 33, "I have said this to you, that in me you may have peace." And of course, Jesus here is talking about inner peace, spiritual peace. In the midst of great upheaval in their lives and in their world, he's talking about the kind of peace that rests secure on the promises of God. And the very fact that Jesus knows this is coming and he's forewarning them. In the world, he says, you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, because I have overcome the world. So the final word of Jesus is a word of encouragement. It will appear that I'm the victim, and yet I will be the victor. The whole thing will look like a tragedy, but in point of fact, it will be a triumph. All right? So I have overcome the world. And so by following me, being my disciple, taking up your cross and following me to the end, you're on the right side of this. There is a battle. It is being waged, and the line is drawn in the sand. And if you're with me, you're on the side of victory. That's a word of encouragement, a beautiful word that we can take with us today as we think about the gospel. Thanks so much for being with us, and I hope to see you again here next time.